They say the devil lives in Boston, but he doesn't wear a cape or carry a pitchfork. He wears a three-piece suit, and his name is Lorenzo Valtieri. The entire police scanner for District 4 went silent. Not because there was no crime, but because the police were told to look away. Why? Because a waitress named Elara Voss was found bleeding in an alleyway. And when Lorenzo Valtieri saw her face, he didn't call an ambulance. He made a phone call that locked down the entire eastern seaboard. By dawn, every man in the city didn't just fear for his job, he feared for his life. This isn't a fairy tale. This is what happens when you touch the only thing a monster loves. The rain in Boston didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Elara Voss hated the rain. It meant the wealthy patrons of the Obsidian, the city's most exclusive underground lounge, would track mud across the marble floors she had just polished. It meant her tips would be damp, and her walk to the bus stop would be miserable. Elara was 23, invisible and exhausted. She wasn't the type of girl men wrote sonnets about. She was the girl who remembered that Mr. Thorne liked his bourbon neat, and that the terrifying man in booth 4 didn't like to be asked if he wanted a refill. He would simply nod when he was ready. Booth 4. That was Lorenzo Valtieri's table. Everyone knew the name Valtieri. It was stitched into the city's infrastructure like a cancerous thread. Construction, shipping, waste management. If money moved in Massachusetts, a Valtieri took a percentage. Lorenzo was the youngest head of the family in history, taking the throne after his father's unfortunate heart attack. Tonight, the air in the Obsidian felt heavy. It was a quiet night, but the VIP section was packed with sons of senators and hedge fund managers trying to play gangster. Elara, the floor manager, a nervous man named Gino, hissed, "Table 7 needs a bottle of Dom. Move." Elara nodded, pushing a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. Her feet throbbed. She grabbed the tray, navigating through the haze of cigar smoke. Table 7 was occupied by Trent Whitaker. Trent was the son of a tech mogul, the kind of boy who thought the world existed to be bought. He was drunk, his tie loose, surrounded by sycophants laughing too hard at his unfunny jokes. "Here you are, gentlemen," Elara said softly, setting the champagne down. Trent looked up. His eyes were glassy and red-rimmed. He didn't look at the bottle. He looked at her. Not at her face, but at the curve of her neck. "You're new." Trent slurred, reaching out. His hand clamped around her wrist. It wasn't a caress. It was a shackle. "I've been here, sir," Elara said, her voice steady despite the spike of fear in her chest. "Please let go. Don't be rude." Trent sneered, pulling her an inch closer. The champagne bucket rattled on the tray. "How much to get you to skip the rest of your shift? My friends and I are going to a penthouse in Seaport. Better view than this dungeon." "I'm not for sale, Mr. Whitaker." Elara tried to twist her arm free, but his grip tightened. His fingernails dug into her skin, sharp enough to bruise. The music in the club was loud, a heavy bass thumping against the walls, masking the interaction, but Elara felt a sudden drop in temperature. It wasn't the AC. From across the room, in the shadows of booth 4, Lorenzo Valtieri stood up. He didn't rush. Lorenzo never rushed. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther stalking through tall grass. He buttoned his suit jacket, a charcoal gray bespoke piece that cost more than Elara's life earnings. Trent didn't see him coming. He was too busy smirking at Elara's struggle. "Let her go." The voice wasn't loud. It was a low rumble, like distant thunder that promises a storm. Trent froze. He looked up, squinting. When he recognized Lorenzo, the color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. "Mr. Valtieri," Trent stammered. We were just joking. Right, sweetheart?" He dropped Elara's wrist like it was burning hot. Elara stumbled back, clutching her arm. There were 4 red crescents etched into her pale skin. Lorenzo didn't look at Trent. His eyes, the color of frozen steel, dropped to Elara's wrist. He stared at the marks for seconds. The silence that radiated from him was deafening. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. "Go to the back, Elara," Lorenzo said. He didn't look at her face. He was still staring at the injury. "I'm fine, sir," she whispered. terrified of causing a scene. Go. It wasn't a request. Elara fled. She hurried through the kitchen doors, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stayed in the break room, shaking. When Gino finally came in, he looked pale. You can go home, Gino said, avoiding her eyes. But my shift. Mr. Valtieri paid for your time, and everyone else's. He closed the club early. Elara blinked. He closed the club. Just go, Elara. Take the back exit. She didn't argue. She changed into her oversized coat, grabbed her purse, and slipped out the heavy steel door into the alleyway. The rain had turned into a deluge. The alley was dark, illuminated only by a flickering yellow security light. Elara pulled her collar up, keeping her head down. She just wanted to get home, feed her cat, and forget the way Lorenzo Valtieri had looked at her wrist. She didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. Thought you could get me embarrassed in front of the king, huh? The voice was wet and slurred. Trent. Elara spun around, gasping. Trent was standing there, but he wasn't alone. Two of his friends were behind him. They looked nervous, but Trent looked unhinged, fueled by humiliation and cocaine. Mr. Whitaker, please, Elara said, backing up until her spine hit the wet brick wall. I didn't do anything. You made me look weak. Trent spat. He stepped forward, closing the distance. Valtieri doesn't give a damn about a waitress. He just likes to swing his dick around. He's gone now, and you owe me an apology. Elara tried to run. She feinted left and tried to sprint past him, but Trent was faster than he looked. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back with a savage force that made her vision white out. She screamed, but the heavy rain drowned it out. He threw her against the dumpsters. Her head cracked against the metal. The world spun. She tasted copper. Hold her, Trent ordered his friends. Trent, man, this is too much, one of them said. Shut up. Do it. Elara fought. She scratched and kicked, connecting with a shin, but a fist collided with her ribs, knocking the wind out of her. She crumpled to the wet pavement. Trent loomed over her, breathing hard. He raised a boot. This, he grunted, kicking her in the stomach, is for the attitude. Pain exploded in her midsection. She curled into a ball, wheezing. And this? He grabbed a jagged piece of a broken glass bottle from the ground. Is so you remember your place. The last thing Elara felt was a searing, hot agony slicing across her arm, the same arm he had grabbed earlier. Then a heavy blow to her temple sent her into the darkness. The silence was the worst part. Elara woke up to the feeling of cold water soaking through her jeans. Her head felt like it had been split open with an axe. She tried to move, but her body screamed in protest. She was alone in the alley. Trent and his friends were gone. She tried to push herself up, but her arm gave way. She looked down. Her gray coat was stained black in the darkness. Blood. So much blood. Help, she croaked, but it came out as a whisper. She heard the sound of a car engine, powerful, close. Headlights swept into the alley, blinding her. A sleek black car, an armored Audi, rolled to a stop feet away. The engine cut. For a moment, Elara thought Trent had come back to finish the job. She tried to crawl behind the dumpster, dragging her injured leg. The car door opened, expensive leather creaking. Steps, slow, deliberate steps, splashing in the puddles. A figure towered over her, blocking out the rain. Elara. The voice wasn't slurred. It was the low rumble of the storm. Lorenzo. She looked up. Through her swollen eye, she saw him. He wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. He was in his white dress shirt, his holster visible under his left arm. He looked down at her, and for a second his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Lorenzo Valtieri dropped to his knees in the filthy alley water. He didn't care about his $1,000 trousers. Don't touch me, Elara whimpered, flinching. Please. Lorenzo froze. His hands hovered over her, trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so potent it made the air vibrate. I'm not going to hurt you, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I need you to tell me where it hurts the most. Everywhere, she sobbed. He gently, so gently it broke her heart, brushed wet hair away from her face. He saw the bruise blooming on her cheekbone. He saw the cut on her lip. Then his eyes traveled down to her arm. The sleeve was shredded. The gash was deep. Lorenzo went still. He looked like a statue carved from ice. He took off his white shirt, just stripped it off right there in the rain, revealing a torso mapped with scars and tattoos. He wrapped the expensive silk around her arm, tying it tight to stop the bleeding. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I caused trouble." Lorenzo stopped. He looked into her eyes. His irises were swirling with violence. "You apologize?" he asked softly. "You are bleeding on the pavement, and you apologize to me." He scooped her up. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Elara rested her head against his bare chest. He was warm, impossibly warm. She could hear his heart beating, a slow, heavy thud. He carried her to the car. He didn't put her in the back seat. He sat in the back and pulled her onto his lap, cradling her against him. "Drive," he ordered the driver. "Hospital, the private wing. Call Dr. Klein. Tell him if he isn't there, I will burn his practice to the ground." The car tore out of the alley. Elara was fading. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only the cold. "Stay with me," Lorenzo commanded. He was holding her face with one hand, his thumb stroking her uninjured cheek. "Elara, look at me." She forced her eyes open. "It hurts. I know." He pulled her closer, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. "I need you to tell me a name." "Lorenzo, give me the name Elara." She hesitated. She knew what giving him a name meant. It meant death. But she remembered the laugh, Trent's laugh, as he kicked her. "Whitaker," she whispered. "Trent Whitaker." Lorenzo closed his eyes. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. When he opened them again, the humanity was gone. The man holding her was gone. The monster had taken the wheel. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "It's Valtieri," he said. The tone of his voice made the driver flinch. "Wake up the Reapers. I want the city sealed." Nothing leaves. No planes, no trains, no boats. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "I don't care if his father is a senator," Lorenzo snarled. "I want him found, and I want him alive. If anyone touches a hair on his head before I get there, I will kill them myself." He hung up and looked down at Elara. She was shivering violently. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he already knew. He just needed to say it. He needed the universe to hear the accusation. "Trent," she murmured, her eyes sliding shut. Lorenzo pressed a kiss to her forehead. It was a promise, a blood oath. "Sleep now, little bird," he whispered against her skin. "By the time you wake up, the world will be a very different place. The emergency room at St. Jude's Medical Center was usually a chaotic mess of overdoses and car accidents, but the entire East Wing was silent. Lorenzo had bought the silence. He stood in the hallway, staring through the glass window of room 304. Inside, nurses were adjusting IV drips. Dr. Klein, the best trauma surgeon in the state, was stitching Elara's arm. Lorenzo was still shirtless, his chest smeared with Elara's blood. He hadn't washed it off. He wanted to feel it drying on his skin. He wanted to remember the metallic smell of it. "Mr. Valtieri." A voice came from behind him. It was Salvatore, his second in command. Salvatore was a giant of a man, an ex-Marine with a scar running down his neck. He held out a fresh black shirt and a towel. Lorenzo took the towel and wiped his hands, but he ignored the shirt. "Status," Lorenzo said. "We have the ports locked down. The airport security is on our payroll. They've grounded all private flights, but—" Salvatore hesitated. "But what?" Lorenzo turned. His eyes were dead. "Trent Whitaker isn't at his apartment. We tracked his phone. It's dead. His father, Senator Whitaker, just put a call into the police commissioner. He knows something is happening. He's claiming his son is being targeted by extremists. Lorenzo laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Extremists. That's a new one. The senator is threatening to bring in the feds, Lorenzo. If we do this, if we touch the son of a sitting senator, we are inviting a war we might not win. Lorenzo walked up to Salvatore, invading his personal space. Look through that window, Salvatore. Salvatore looked. He saw the small, frail girl in the bed, hooked up to machines. That girl, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a whisper, makes the coffee I drink every morning. She remembers that I hate small talk. She has never asked me for a dime. Tonight, I watched a piece of filth break her because he thought she didn't matter. Lorenzo turned back to the window. If we don't burn the world for the things we love, Salvatore, then why are we kings? I don't care about the feds. I don't care about the senator. Find the boy. Salvatore nodded, understanding. We got a ping on one of Trent's friends, the one who was with him, a kid named Ryder. He's trying to buy a bus ticket to Providence. Bring him to the warehouse, Lorenzo said. I have some questions. And Trent is running, Lorenzo said. Rats always run when the lights come on. Put a bounty on him. 5 million. Alive. Salvatore's eyes widened. 5 million. Every hitman from here to Chicago will be tearing the city apart. Good, Lorenzo said. Let them fear. By dawn, I want every man in the city to know that if they touch what is mine, there's no hole deep enough to hide in. The warehouse in the South Boston shipyard smelled of rust and old seawater. It was a place where things went to disappear. Lorenzo walked in, the heels of his Italian shoes clicking against the concrete. In the center of the vast empty room, a single chair sat under a hanging bulb. Tied to it was Ryder, the boy who had been with Trent. He was 19, wearing a varsity jacket and currently sobbing so hard he was hyperventilating. Salvatore stood guard, arms crossed. He hasn't stopped crying since we picked him up. Lorenzo approached the chair. He didn't yell. He didn't strike. He simply pulled up a metal crate and sat down directly in front of the boy, crossing his legs. Ryder, Lorenzo said. The boy's head snapped up. I didn't do it. I swear, Mr. Valtieri, I didn't touch her. It was all Trent. I tried to stop him. I know, Lorenzo said calmly. If you had touched her, you wouldn't be sitting in a chair. You would be in the harbor. Ryder hiccuped, hope flaring in his terrified eyes. But, Lorenzo continued, his voice dropping an octave, you watched. You stood there and watched a woman bleed because you were too afraid of a senator's son to do the right thing. Cowardice is a sin, Ryder, and tonight I am the priest. Lorenzo leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Where is he? I don't know. He ran. Lorenzo sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a lighter. He flicked it open, the flame dancing in the drafty room. I don't have time for lies, Ryder. My patience is bleeding out in a hospital bed across town. Every second you waste is a second I get closer to losing my temper. He went to the lake house. Ryder screamed, shrinking away from the tiny flame. His dad's place in the Berkshires. He said his dad has a panic room there. Please, that's all I know. Lorenzo snapped the lighter shut. He stood up. The Berkshires, Lorenzo mused. He turned to Salvatore. Get the car and call the boys. We aren't taking a stealth team. We're taking a caravan. Just then, Lorenzo's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Lorenzo answered. Speak. You have made a grave mistake, Mr. Valtieri. The voice was cultured, smooth, and aged. Senator Reginald Whitaker. Senator, Lorenzo said, walking toward the exit, leaving a sobbing Ryder behind. I was wondering when you'd call. I assume you know your son is a dead man walking. My son is a troubled boy who made a mistake, the senator said, his voice tightening. He does not deserve to die for a bar fight. Call off your dogs, Lorenzo. If you step foot on my property in the Berkshires, you won't be dealing with local police. I have Blackwater contractors on site. Federal contacts are on standby. You come for him, and you lose your empire. Is a waitress worth your kingdom? Lorenzo paused at the warehouse door. He looked out at the rain, which was still falling in sheets. He thought of Elara's hand, how small it looked wrapped in his bandages. He thought of the way she whispered, "I'm sorry," while bleeding. "You think this is about a waitress, Reginald?" Lorenzo asked softly. "This is about consequence. You raised a wolf who thought he could eat the sheep without fear, but he forgot that the sheep belonged to the shepherd." "You are signing your death warrant," the senator threatened. "Then bring a coffin," Lorenzo said. "Make it a double, one for me and one for your son." He hung up and threw the phone into the harbor water. "Salvatore!" Lorenzo barked. "Load up! We're going to war." The Whitaker estate was a fortress hidden deep in the woods of western Massachusetts. High stone walls, iron gates, and cameras covering every inch of the perimeter. The convoy of black SUVs rolled up the winding driveway. They didn't sneak in. They drove right up to the front gate with headlights blazing. Lorenzo sat in the lead car. He checked his gun, a matte black custom 1911. "There are 6 guards at the gate," Salvatore said from the driver's seat. "Mercenaries, high grade." "Go through them," Lorenzo ordered. The SUV accelerated. The gate guards raised their rifles, shouting orders to stop. The first shot shattered the windshield of Lorenzo's car, embedding itself in the bulletproof glass. "Now," Lorenzo bellowed. The sunroofs of the 3 SUVs behind them popped open. Lorenzo's men emerged, returning fire with suppressed assault rifles. It was precise, brutal efficiency. The guards at the gate didn't stand a chance against the sheer ferocity of the Valtieri syndicate. The gate was rammed open by the lead truck. The convoy roared onto the manicured lawn. Lorenzo stepped out of the car before it had even fully stopped moving. The mansion loomed ahead, dark and imposing. "Secure the perimeter!" Lorenzo shouted to his men. No one leaves. He walked toward the front door, gun drawn. Salvatore and 2 other enforcers flanked him. The front door exploded inward before they could touch it. The mercenaries inside were firing through the wood. Lorenzo ducked behind a stone pillar. Bullets chipped away the masonry near his head. "Flashbang!" Salvatore yelled, tossing a canister through the broken door. Boom! A blinding white light. Lorenzo moved. He swept into the grand foyer, stepping over the dazed mercenaries. He fired twice, double taps, efficient and lethal. He wasn't killing for sport. He was clearing a path. He moved through the house like a wraith. The kitchen, the library, the drawing room, clear. He found the entrance to the panic room behind a bookshelf in the study. It was a heavy steel door, coated and reinforced. "It's locked tight," Salvatore said, examining the keypad. "We need a drill. It'll take time." "I don't have time," Lorenzo growled. He stepped up to the steel door and banged the hilt of his gun against it. "Trent!" he roared. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. "I know you can hear me. Open this door, and I promise you a quick death. Keep it closed, and I will burn this house down with you inside." Silence. Then the intercom crackled. "You're insane." Trent's voice came through, trembling but arrogant. "My dad's chopper is inbound. You're trapped, Valtieri. The feds are coming. You're done." Lorenzo laughed. He leaned his forehead against the cold steel. "You think your father called the feds?" Lorenzo asked, his voice echoing off the metal. "Your father didn't call the feds, Trent. He called me when he needed money to run his campaign. He called me when he needed his mistress's accident to disappear." Lorenzo signaled to Salvatore, who handed him a bag of C4 plastic explosive. "Your father isn't coming to save you," he said, molding the clay onto the door hinges. "He was halfway to the Cayman Islands while you were begging for your life." Lorenzo stepped back. "Fire in the hole." The explosion shook the foundations of the house. Dust and smoke filled the room. The heavy steel door groaned and fell inward with a deafening crash. Lorenzo walked through the smoke. Trent was huddled in the corner of the panic room, holding a small pistol. He was shaking so badly he could barely hold it up. "Stay back!" Trent screamed. Lorenzo didn't stop. He walked right up to the gun barrel. He reached out, grabbed the slide of the pistol, and wrenched it from Trent's grip, tossing it aside like a toy. Trent scrambled back, pressing himself against the wall. Please, I have money. I have. Lorenzo grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall. You hurt her, Lorenzo hissed, his face inches from Trent's. Why? Trent's eyes were wide, weeping. I didn't mean to. She was just a waitress. Why do you care? She's nobody. She is everything. Lorenzo roared. He raised his fist. Wait, Trent shrieked. Wait! It wasn't just me. I was told to do it. Lorenzo froze. His fist hovered in the air. What? My dad! Trent sobbed. My dad told me to go to the Obsidian. He told me to pick a fight. He said he needed a distraction. He said if I caused a scene, you'd be focused on me and he could move the shipment through the docks. The air left the room. Lorenzo slowly lowered his hand. He released Trent's throat, letting the boy slide to the floor. It was a setup. Elara hadn't just been a victim of a drunk boy. She had been collateral damage in a political game. Senator Whitaker had used his own son as bait to draw Lorenzo away from the city so he could move illegal cargo through Valtieri territory without inspection. The rage that filled Lorenzo now was cold. It wasn't the fiery anger of a lover. It was the glacial, calculated wrath of a king. Your father, Lorenzo said quietly, sent you to die. Trent looked up, confusion and heartbreak mixing on his face. No. He said he'd protect me. He used you, Lorenzo said. He knew if you touched my waitress, I would hunt you. He knew I would leave the city to find you. He served you up on a silver platter to keep my eyes off this shipment. Trent looked at his father. He looked at the briefcase the senator was still clutching so tightly, tightly enough to turn his knuckles white. Is that true? Trent whispered. Dad, you knew he would come for me. It's complicated, son. The senator yelled, panic taking over. You've always been a screw-up. I needed the capital. I did it for us. For the name. For your name? Trent screamed. Lorenzo pulled the gun he had taken from Trent earlier, the small chrome pistol the boy had tried to use in the panic room. He racked the slide, chambering around. He held it out, handle first, to Trent. He left you to rot in a panic room, Lorenzo said softly to the boy. He didn't call the police. He didn't call the feds. He was halfway to the Cayman Islands while you were begging for your life. Trent took the gun. His hands were shaking violently. He looked at the man who raised him, the man who had taught him that money solved everything. No, the senator whispered, raising his hands. Trent, listen to me. He's a criminal. I'm your father. You're not a father. Trent spat, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood. You're just a politician. Trent raised the gun. Lorenzo turned his back. He didn't need to watch. He began walking toward his car, the sound of his footsteps steady on the pavement. Bang! The shot rang out, sharp and final. The seagulls on the nearby piling scattered, screeching into the gray dawn. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He didn't look back to see the senator's body hit the water or to see Trent drop to his knees, sobbing into his hands. Lorenzo opened the car door. Salvatore, he said, his voice weary. Call the press. An anonymous tip. Senator Whitaker was caught in a crossfire during a drug deal gone wrong involving his estranged son. Ruin the reputation. Bury the legacy. And the boy? Salvatore asked, looking back at the weeping figure on the dock. He stays, Lorenzo said. He has to live with what he did. That is a punishment worse than death. He slid into the leather seat, the adrenaline finally leaving his system. The monster receded, and the man returned. The image of the senator's greed faded, replaced by the memory of a girl in a hospital bed. Take me to St. Jude's, Lorenzo ordered, closing his eyes. And drive fast. The world didn't come back all at once. It returned in fragments. First, there was the smell. Not the metallic tang of blood or the sour stench of the wet alleyway, but something clean, sharp, like antiseptic and expensive lilies. Then the sound, the rhythmic, hypnotic beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor, the hum of central air, the distant muffled sound of traffic that felt miles away. Elara Voss forced her eyes open. Her eyelids felt heavy, as if weighted down by lead coins. The light in the room was dim, the blinds drawn against the morning sun. She tried to take a deep breath, but her ribs screamed in protest, a sharp, hot lance of pain that made her gasp. "Easy," a voice commanded. "Do not move." It was a voice she knew, a voice that usually sounded like thunder, now reduced to a jagged whisper. Elara turned her head to the left. The movement made the room spin, but when her vision cleared, her heart skipped a beat. Lorenzo Valtieri was sitting in a stiff hospital chair pulled right up to the edge of her bed. But this wasn't the Lorenzo she knew from the Obsidian. The impeccable, armored king of Boston was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had walked through hell and decided to stay there. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the expensive white silk stained with dried rust-colored blood. His jaw was dark with stubble. His hair, usually slicked back with military precision, was falling over his forehead. But it was his eyes that frightened her. They were bloodshot, wide, and fixed on her face with a terrifying intensity. He looked like a man who hadn't blinked in hours. "Lorenzo," she croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. He moved instantly. He didn't just stand. He surged forward, grabbing a plastic cup of water with a straw and bringing it to her lips. His hands, she noticed, were trembling. The hands that could dismantle a pistol in seconds were shaking as they held a cup of water. "Drink," he murmured. Slowly, she drank. The cool water was the best thing she had ever tasted. When she pulled away, he set the cup down as if it were made of fragile glass and immediately took her hand in his. His grip was tight, desperate. "You're here," she whispered, looking at the blood on his shirt. "You're hurt." "This isn't mine," he said, his voice flat. He didn't look at his shirt. He couldn't stop looking at her, scanning her face as if checking for cracks. "I'm fine. You stopped breathing in the ambulance, Elara." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Elara blinked, the memory of the alley rushing back. The rain, the boot, the glass. Trent's laugh. "I thought I died," she admitted softly. "You almost did." Lorenzo brought her hand to his face, pressing his lips against her knuckles. He kept them there, his eyes closing. She felt a shudder run through his massive frame. "I tore the city apart, Elara. I broke every rule I ever made, and all I could think about was that I was too late." "Trent," she started, her heart rate spiking on the monitor. "Is handled," Lorenzo cut in, his tone hardening instantly. He pulled back, his eyes turning to steel. "The threat is gone. It has been erased from the earth." Just then, the door to the private suite opened. Salvatore walked in. The giant enforcer looked tired, but when he saw Elara was awake, he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since yesterday. He was carrying a tablet. "Boss," Salvatore said quietly, "the news is breaking." Lorenzo didn't look away from Elara. "Show her." Salvatore hesitated, then walked to the side of the bed and held up the screen. It was the front page of the Boston Globe. The headline was bold, black, and screaming. Senator Whitaker dead in Port Authority shootout. Linked to drug cartels suspected. Son Trent Whitaker taken into federal custody. Elara read the words, but her brain struggled to process them. Senator Whitaker, one of the most powerful men on the eastern seaboard. Dead. "You did this," she whispered, looking from the screen to Lorenzo. "Lorenzo, you killed a U.S. senator." "He was moving stolen bearer bonds," Lorenzo said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "He used his son to lure me away so he could move his shipment. He let you get hurt. He ordered you to be hurt, just to create a distraction." Lorenzo stood up. Then he loomed over the bed, his presence filling the sterile room. "I told you, Elara. If they touch what is mine, I will burn the world." The senator thought his title would protect him. He thought the law applied to me. Lorenzo's lip curled. He was wrong. Elara looked at him. She should have been terrified. She was looking at a mass murderer, a man who had declared war on the government for the sake of a waitress. But she didn't feel fear. She felt a profound, overwhelming sense of safety. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the invisible girl. She was the reason the city was burning. "And Trent?" she asked. "He is alive," Lorenzo said, though the word clearly tasted bitter to him. "He is in federal custody. He will spend years in a cell, knowing that his father used him as bait. Death would have been a mercy." I didn't feel like being merciful. Elara lay back against the pillows, her mind reeling. "Everyone will know it was you." "Everyone who matters knows," Lorenzo said. "The police know. The feds know. But they won't touch me. Because the senator was dirty, and I have the evidence to prove it. I did their job for them. By tomorrow I won't be a suspect. I'll be a concerned citizen who tipped them off." He reached into the pocket of his bloodied trousers and pulled out a set of heavy brass keys. He placed them on the bedside table next to the morphine drip. "What are these?" Elara asked. "I fired Gino," Lorenzo said. Elara blinked. "The manager, he let you walk out that back door. He knew Trent was waiting. He was a coward." Lorenzo tapped the keys on the table. "These are the keys to the Obsidian and the deed to the building." "Lorenzo." Elara started, trying to sit up again, ignoring the pain. "I can't. That's insane. I'm a waitress." "No," Lorenzo said firmly. He leaned down, placing a hand on either side of her head, boxing her in. His face was inches from hers. "You are not a waitress. You are the woman who brought the Valtieri syndicate to its knees without firing a shot. You are the only person in this city who sees me, Elara, not the money, not the monster. Me." He brushed a thumb over her bruised cheekbone. "I don't want you serving drinks anymore," he whispered. "I want you to own the place where they are poured. I want you to walk into that room and know that no one can ever make you feel small again. I am giving you a kingdom, little bird. All you have to do is learn to fly." Elara looked at the keys. They were cold and heavy. They represented power. They represented a life she never thought she could have. A life of danger, yes, but a life of respect. She looked up at Lorenzo. She saw the question in his eyes. He was offering her a way out or a way in. She could take a payout and leave, disappear to a farm in Vermont. Or she could take the keys. She reached out with her uninjured hand and curled her fingers around the brass. "I don't know the first thing about running a club," she whispered. A slow, wolfish grin spread across Lorenzo's face, the first genuine smile she had ever seen him wear. "I'll teach you," he promised. "I'll teach you everything." Months later, the reopening of the Obsidian was not just a party. It was a coronation. The winter had turned to spring, and the Boston air was crisp and clear. Outside the club, a line of black limousines stretched down the block. Paparazzi were fighting for position behind the velvet ropes, their flashbulbs popping like strobes in the night. Inside, the transformation was absolute. The basement lounge was no longer a dungeon of smoke and shadows. It had been reborn. The walls were upholstered in deep emerald velvet. The floors were black marble that shone like water, and the lighting was warm, golden, and flattering. On the mezzanine balcony overlooking the sea of dancers, Elara stood, watching her empire. She wore a backless gown of liquid silver that clung to her curves like a second skin. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing the long, elegant line of her neck. But she didn't hide the scar. The jagged, pale line that ran down her left forearm was visible for the world to see. Some women would have covered it with long sleeves or makeup. Elara wore it like a diamond. It was the mark of her survival. It was the receipt for the price that had been paid for this life. "They're afraid of you." A voice rumbled in her ear. Lorenzo stepped up behind her. He slid his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He felt solid, warm, and immovable. He was wearing a bespoke tuxedo, looking every inch the king of the city. "Let them be afraid," Elara said, her voice steady and cool. She leaned back into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Fear keeps the glass from breaking. She looked down at the crowd. She saw the new police commissioner raising a glass of scotch. She saw business tycoons who used to snap their fingers at her for a refill, now looking up at the balcony with reverence. She saw Gino's replacement, a sharp woman named Beatrice, managing the floor with military efficiency. Elara wasn't serving the champagne anymore. She was the one they were toasting. "Do you regret it?" Lorenzo asked softly, his lips brushing the sensitive spot behind her ear. "The normal life, the quiet." Elara thought about it. She thought about the bus rides in the rain. She thought about the invisibility. Then she looked at the man holding her, the man who had destroyed a dynasty because she had scraped her knee. "I never had a normal life, Lorenzo," she said, turning in his arms to face him. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart. "I was just waiting for my life to start." Lorenzo stared down at her, his eyes full of a dark, consuming worship. "And has it?" "It has," she whispered. He kissed her then. It wasn't the tentative kiss of a suitor. It was the claiming kiss of a husband, a partner, a lover. It happened in full view of the club. The music seemed to swell, the bass vibrating through the floorboards. Below them, the city of Boston continued to spin. Deals were made in the shadows, money changed hands, and secrets were whispered in the dark. But up on the balcony, the king and queen stood untouchable. Lorenzo Valtieri had been feared for a decade, but as he looked at Elara glowing in the golden light, he knew the truth. He used to be the most dangerous man in the city because he had nothing to lose. Now he was the most dangerous man in the world because he had everything to lose, and God help anyone who tried to take it from him again. Elara pulled back, breathless, her lipstick slightly smudged. She smiled, a dangerous, beautiful curve of her lips that matched his own. "Come on, Mr. Valtieri," she said, taking his hand and leading him toward the stairs. "The music is playing, and I think this is our song. And that, my friends, is the story of Elara and Lorenzo. It's a reminder that sometimes the monsters in the stories aren't the ones hiding under the bed. They're the ones burning down the castle to save the princess. But in this story, the princess didn't just get saved, she got the keys to the kingdom. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a mafia romance, please destroy that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. I have a story coming up next week about a bodyguard and a thief that you absolutely won't want to miss. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next.